Okay, let's begin. We are on Daf Kafchet Amud Bet 28 B3, and let's go back and see the Gemara one more time where we left off. Tenan Hatam, we learned over there. Okay, somewhere else. Udishtamesh b'tagach halaf. The Gemara that I quoted to you, I mentioned the story of Rabbi Tarfon. Udishtamesh b'tagach halaf. That if a person uses with the crown halaf has v'shalom, they're gonna shuffle off the mortal coil. It's a very, very strict expression. All right. Tani Resh Lakish. The Gemara says Resh Lakish taught. Okay, zeh mishtamesh b'mish shoneh halachot. Someone you use someone who's studying halakha, kitra shel Torah, that is the crown of Torah. So what does that mean? Let's say you have a Talmid Chacham, you say, oh, could you just hold my bag for 2 minutes? By the way, you don't know, people are not aware of this. The other day I went somewhere, someone said, here's a camera. He said, could you take a picture? Now, I don't know if I'm a Talmid Chacham, but if I was, that would be asur. It's called shimush Talmidei Chachamim. You're using a Talmid Chacham to serve you. There are people who won't ask, if you're sitting at a dinner table and there's a rabbi sitting in the middle, they won't ask the rabbi, pass me the thing.
I thought that's the thing for Kohanim.
The same concept. The idea is the same. You're using someone who's of an elevated status, Kohen of an elevated Kohanic family status, Talmid Chacham of an elevated rabbinic status, but in either scenario, you're not allowed to use a Talmid Chacham. So Resh Lakish teaches that if you use the crown of Torah, chalaf, has v'shalom, a person, his life, he might pay for that with his life. So Gemara asks, what does it mean to use the crown of Torah? To take the crown off the sefer and put it on your head? No, it means to use someone who's studying Torah. I always loved the expression over here of the Gemara. The Gemara is telling us that a Talmid Chacham is the crown of Torah. Today, you have a rabbi come in for tzedakah, like, oh, get a job. You hear people, the way that they speak about a Talmid Chacham, I have to support you so you could sit and learn. Sitting and learning is the great. If you're a proud Jew, you're proud of your Judaism. Here's a person who's dedicating their life to learning in order to practice, in order to teach Judaism. The people who should be given the greatest respect in our nation are the people who are studying Torah. You think about that, you see this punk comes back from Israel where he's learning, right? Doesn't show me respect. You should be showing him respect. It's a wild thing. But that's what Resh Lakish is telling you. Misha shoneh halachot, someone who's learning halachot. Now, there's a disagreement over how to understand the next bit of the Gemara. The Gemara says, Ve'amar Ula, and Ula taught. So we're not sure, is Ula disagreeing on what Resh Lakish is saying, or is Ula making a point on what Resh Lakish is saying? Resh Lakish just said, if someone is learning halachot, someone's learning Torah, you can't use them for your own personal benefit. Ve'amar Ula, and Ula says, Lishtamish inish b'man detani arba'a. If a person uses someone who studied the 4 portions, the 4 chalakim of Shisha Sedrei Mishnah. Remember, Shisha Mishnah is divided into 6, not tractates, right? But the 6 orders. So the simplest one is, as an example to think about, is Moed. The law, the Mishnayot governing those to do with a holiday. So as an example, what's in Seder Moed? Ahlan sahlan. What's in Seder Moed? Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah, right? Yomah, Sukkah, all of those are part of Moed. What's part of Nizikin? Baba Kama, Baba Metziah, Baba Batra. All of those are part of Nizikin, of the damages that a person might do to someone else and therefore is obligated to pay. Nashim, women, involves Kiddushin, Gitin, Yevamot, okay? So those are the tractates that fall under the pillar of Nashim. So the Gemara says over here, Ula says, Lishtamish inish, let a person use, Beman detani arba, a person who studied 4 orders of the Mishnah, V'lo lishtamish beman de matni arba, but let him not use someone who taught the 4 orders. Okay? Now, what exactly are we communicating here? Before we move on, what are we communicating? Is Ula saying, Resh Lakish, you said that you can't use a Talmid Chacham who studied halacha, comes Ula and says, no. It's not that you can't use a person who studied. You can't use a person who taught.
Making a distinction.
Yeah, in other words, it's not just the guy who learned it, it's the guy who learned it well enough that he's now teaching the Mishnah. Okay? So that's one way of understanding this Gemara. In that case, Ula is saying that a person who just learns but never taught doesn't have the halacha of the crown of Torah, and he is not yet at that stage where you can't ask him to do something for you. Okay. The other way of understanding is Ula is saying, if I have a choice between a guy who studied the four orders and a guy who taught the four orders, they're a different categoric understanding, and therefore I should choose rather to use the person who's studied than the person who's taught it. Yeah?
No.
Okay. So that's so far the Gemara. And with...
Is the person that Rav Nachman eulogizes?
Sorry?
Is that like the person that Rav Nachman gave the eulogy for? Like we lost just a person who, like a basket of books, like he knew it, but he didn't know it enough to give it over?
So I don't know. It's hard to say exactly what Rav Nachman was saying. Maybe Rav Nachman, we said the other day, was saying it only out of doubt, and he didn't know it for sure. And he was nervous to praise undeservedly someone at their funeral, because we said it causes tremendous tsa'ar to the niftar, and not only that, it actually creates a case against them. Oh, this is what they're saying you were. We're looking at the books, and you weren't that. If no one said anything like that, then you'd be judged as a regular good guy. Now they're saying you're the biggest rabbi in the world. In Shamayim, they're like, well, okay? So it causes a greater judgment to be raised against a person. So it could be that Rav Nachman was just saying it out of choser yedi'ah. Like, I don't know, so I'm just saying, here's a wonderful basket filled with books. But I'm not saying more than what I already know, okay? But it's definitely rolling off of those teachings of Rav Nachman and Rish Lakish that we're talking about a person who is being described in some way as a Talmid Chacham. Says the Gemara, where do we see this idea of Ula? Where do we see this? Rish Lakish was traveling on the road. He comes to Mata Urkema Demaya. He reaches a stream, a river. And he can't get across Kanireh. He can't get across the river for whatever reason. A man comes, Hahu Gavra, this man comes along, whoever it is. He puts him on his shoulders and he takes him across the river. Amaleh, he said to him, Karita, did you read Pisukim? Why does it say Karita, did you read? What we're referring to over here is back then, if you remember, we said earlier, there was no Torah Sheba'al Peh that was written down. So no Mishnayot, no Gemara, nothing was written down. So anything that you studied that was Torah Sheba'al Peh, you didn't read. No, you didn't read it. So when you're talking about a guy who knows Tanakh, you would say Karita, did you read? Because it was written Torah. When you were talking about the Mishnayot, you said Shanita. It's a different language because one is read and one is studied, by sitting with the rabbi. Okay, so the Gemara says he asked him, Karita, did you read? Amaleh Karina, he said, yes, I read. I read the Tanakh. Tanita, did you learn? He says, Tanina, I learned Arba Sidrei Mishnah. I learned 4 of the orders of the Mishnah. Amarle, he said to him, Pisalta lecha arba turei. You carved out, right, from the word in the Torah, pisol lecha, right? You chiseled out arba turei, 4 of the orders of the Mishnah. V'ta'anta bar Lakish katpech, and you carrying me on your shoulders. Shadi bar Lakisha b'maya. Throw me in the river, Rish Lakish says. Amaleh, he said, Nichali de'ashmi'inan lemar. It's good for me, de'ashmi'inan lemar. Now, it's interesting what this word means. Because one way of understanding it is he's saying, no, it's not a burden for me. I'm very happy to be serving such a big rabbi as yourself. Rish Lakish is obviously much bigger a rabbi than him. So he was just saying, I'm so happy to be serving you. So it's not like a burden for me to be carrying you, it's a privilege. Okay? That's one way of understanding what he said to him. Nichali da'ashmi'inan lemar. The other way of understanding this is that he wasn't saying it was a privilege. He's saying, if I have a chance to carry you on my shoulders, maybe I'll get to hear some words of Torah from you. From word like Shmoah, okay? So he said, if that's true, Gemor mini hamilta. Learn from me these words. The Amar Reb Zera said, the daughters of Israel, Am Yisrael, the women, they accepted on themselves as a stringency, something that they were not obligated to do from the Torah. If they would see a little bit of blood coming out of their on a menstrual cycle, they would see the tiniest amount, even the amount of blood like a seed, a mustard seed. It doesn't mean that specifically. It just means a minuscule amount. Yoshvot alav shiv'a nikiim. They would consider it as if they had experienced a flow, which makes a woman have to wait a shiv'a nikiim. Now, let's just be clear. A woman becomes tameh even by seeing the tiniest amount of blood. There isn't a minimal amount of blood that would render a woman tameh when she's tameh from nida. We don't mean for tum'ah over here. That's not a stringency. That's the law in the Torah. What they accepted on themselves was that even the most minute amount, they would wait shiv'a niki'im. Now, let me just explain what this means, and it's a little bit technical, but I want you to understand the Gemara properly. When it comes to nida, the baseline halacha is that she would only really need to experience shiv'a niki'im. When does she need to wait 7 clean days when she doesn't see a drop of blood? That's only if she saw 3 times, okay? Where she has a halacha of a zava. Zava is someone who's experiencing a flow that's sustained. When you see 1 time, you're tameh, but you don't need to wait 7 days of clean, without seeing blood in order to be able to go to the mikveh. If you just counted 7 days, even if there was blood that you saw during those 7 days, just not 3 days in a row, you could still dip on the 7th day because you have the halacha of a nida. Once you get to a level of zava, right, where there's a sustained flow, then already you need to count 7 clean days. So zava needs to wait 7 nikiim. Nida does not need to wait 7 nikiim, lehalacha. Says the Gemara, but Am Yisrael accepted on themselves to look at nida as if it was zava. Which means that practically it makes no difference anymore. The minute they see any blood whatsoever, they're already looking at themselves as if they're a zava, and they're waiting to count shiv'a nikim, 7 clean days before they could go to the mikveh. Clear?
Yeah.
Okay. So now Resh Lakish teaches the guy whose shoulders he's on this halacha. If ever there was a random halacha to teach the guy who's carrying you, it would be this halacha. I would imagine you could have said anything else. It would be more connected to the fact that the guy is telling him that he wants to carry him on the shoulders, okay? Now, let's try and understand what it means, but before we do so, I just want to structure the Gemara in its proper light. So we understand what just took place. One way of understanding the Gemara is, he said, listen, I'm very happy to carry you because maybe I'll learn some Torah. So he taught him a halacha, whatever that halacha was. Okay, it could be connected, it could be disconnected. It might be what Resh Lakish taught that day in the synagogue, in the halacha, in the halacha between Mincha and Arbit. Okay, that's one way of understanding it. Okay, the second way of understanding.
Maybe that's tomorrow's halacha. See what the Kahal says. Right?
Exactly. The second way of understanding what's going on over here is something actually very profound. It's not that Resh Lakish was saying, oh, I want to hear halakha, and he told him halakha. No. What he's saying is, Nicha le da'ashmina, and he says, I'm very happy to serve you. So, this is a privilege for me. Resh Lakish is not accepting that. So what's he doing? The guy doesn't want to put him down. He's refusing. Resh Lakish says, throw me in the river. Right? And the guy says, no, I'm very happy. I'm happy, Rabbi. No, please. Chavur. Fada. Right? Stay on my shoulders. What does Resh Lakish do? He turns him from a Talmid Chacham, into a Talmid.
Because he had to teach him something that he for sure doesn't know.
So maybe he taught him something completely disconnected, because if the guy doesn't know it, now you become my student, and a rabbi is allowed to get service from his student.
That's how far out there this is. Yeah.
Right? So he went the distance, right? But you understand what's going on over here. So the halacha says that a person who's a student is allowed to ask, his rabbi is allowed to make use of him. In other words, go get me a cup of water from downstairs. Why? He's a Talmid Chacham. Who cares if he's your student? The answer is, right, why? Why would it make a difference that he's a student? This is very interesting. So there's a beautiful Gemara. Gemara tells us that there was a great rabbi who had a very difficult question that he posed to one of the big rabbis of the generation. So he tells him, he says, listen, I'll give you the answer if you want, Fadal, no problem, I'll give you the answer. But first he says, fold my napkin. Like he had a towel or whatever he had there. He said, fold it for me, and then I'll give you the answer. He folds it, he gives him the answer. He asks him a bomb question on the answer that he gives. Then the rabbi explained it and ultimately understood. Okay? The commentators say, first of all, what is he doing? Are you getting free laundry over here? Is that what was he doing? Number one. Question number one. Number two is that the person who asked him the question was actually a Kohen. So how was he making use, asked the Gemara, of him as a Kohen? You're not allowed to ask a Kohen to do chores for you. So the Gemara asks a double question, double whammy. Answers, I believe it was the Pnei Yoshua, magnificent answer. He said, this question that you ask is a very good question. And the correct answer I'm going to give you is an answer that is very tough at first glance to accept. Because there's a bomb question on the answer that I'm giving you. What he wanted to do is he wanted the guy to feel, before he gave him the answer, like he was subservient to him. Like, here, fold this for me. If you treat me with respect,
you can understand it.
Then you'll treat what I say with respect. Mm-hmm. And then you're not just going to be like, this guy's what he's talking about, and leave. You'll bother to ask the question and hear the answer, and then you'll have what you came for. But if I don't turn you into a student, you're not going to learn from me. Yeah?
If you don't respect the Talmid.
So why is a rabbi allowed to make a person who is a student serve him? To teach him Torah. And if you don't relate to your rabbi as if he's bigger than you think you know everything, what happens? You don't truly learn from him. So if the reason why I can't make a Talmid Chacham do a job for me is because it's not kavod for the Torah, how about if doing the job is what gives me the Torah? Obviously it will be allowed. That's why creating a Talmid is able, once he's your Talmid, you're able to have him do something for you, because the chores that you do for your rabbi create this reality. In fact, the Mishnah in Avot says about Talmidei Chachamim, Gadol Shimushan Yoter Milimudan. Greater is what you get when you serve a rabbi than what you get when you learn from a rabbi. You go to the class, I'm Mr. Whomever, I came from my office to sit with the rabbi, I'm going to study with the rabbi. I study with him, right? Whereas Shimusho, like, rabbi, please, you need a rabbi, I'm going to come pick you up, I'm going to do this. You wind up, because you've made yourself humble to do something for the rabbi, you become a sponge, and you listen, and you respect, and if there's something you don't understand, you take the time to try and understand why they say that, why they do that, how come they behave that way, etc., etc. So therefore, that was why Resh Lakish told him this. Now, maybe there's a way, a chidush, to understand why Resh Lakish taught him this halacha more than any other halacha. Okay, why? Why did he teach him this halacha? The answer is very, very simple. What's the difference between a woman who experiences one drop and a woman who experiences a zava? What's the difference between those two? Right? The difference is whether it's established as a flow. In other words, if you had a drop, she's a nida. What establishes a zava? If there's a consistent a flow of 3 days in a row. What was Resh Lakish teaching this student? He was teaching him, we know that Torah is always compared to water that flows. And where does it flow? It flows from a high place to a low place. We've discussed this many, many times. So what Resh Lakish was teaching him is, you say you have, I asked you about learning. You told me that you studied the Mishnah. Now you're carrying me on your shoulders. Why? Because, you imagine me to be a big Torah scholar. Let me explain to you what the difference is between me and you. Nice. Now, let me add to that. Okay, it says right here in the beginning that Resh Lakish reaches this little shlulit, urkema demaya. He reaches a stream of water. Do you know the origin story of Resh Lakish?
Isn't it that he parted the water?
No. Origin story Resh Lakish. Resh Lakish is a robber. He's the king of thieves, the prince of thieves.
Highwayman.
Yes.
And,
Oh, he saw
and
the
then
guy
he
he thought was
lost
a
his
woman.
power to jump over the river, and then ended up marrying the other rabbi's sister.
Hold on, not lost the power before. He had the power. So he sees Rabbi Yochanan dipping in the water. Rabbi Yochanan was magnificent, beautiful. He thought it was a woman. He decided he's going to go try and see who this beautiful woman was. He's standing on the side of the river. He jumps the entire river to the other side from the mountain, and then he sees that it's Rabbi Yochanan. He realizes who it is. Rabbi Yochanan sees someone who has this unbelievable strength. He says, if you would only use that strength that you have in this jump to be able to study Torah, I'll marry you off to my sister, who's more beautiful than me. Resh Lakish says, in. In.
Smart.
The Gemara says, immediately, once he accepted to learn Torah, he tried to jump back over the river. He couldn't make it. Why? Because Torah mateshet kocho shel adam. Because when a person studies Torah, giving the person's life force to the spiritual means that you're not giving it all to the physical. Even just the agreement to study and become a disciple of Yohanan limited his strength. He couldn't jump back over the river. Now we're learning about Yochanan. He reaches a stream. He can't even get across the stream. Until this other guy comes along, what does the guy say? Come, I'll take you on my shoulders.
Regular guy.
But I'm a Torah guy. No, I learned, I read, I studied 4 orders of the Mishnah. Yochanan Rish Lakish is explaining to him.
Strong.
The Benot Yisrael, the smallest amount, looks like a zava. But what's the true difference between a tiny bit and a zava is the repetition, day after day after day. That's going to cause you to be the Talmicha. Look at you, you're carrying me across this river, right?
You can't be that strong in the other area.
Exactly. All right, let's carry it.
Rabbi,
Chidush.
this is also a halacha pesukah, right?
What is?
Brachot, it says that the Benot Yisrael that they hold the mustard seed. It's a halacha pesukah, that there's no controversy over this halacha.
Zero controversy. It is completely accepted by all of Am Yisrael.
What does that mean?
That, in other words, that you read this Gemara, you're like, oh, so that's like an extra thing. They took on an extra thing. It's not an extra thing. The Gemara actually relates that there was a certain rabbi who differentiated between Nida and Zava, and he said, no, for Nida she doesn't need, only for Zava, and he was not strict with that with his wife, and he died young. Because what's the punishment of Nida? It's karet. And the rabbis say, you see that he didn't follow this halacha, and if he didn't follow it when it was Nida, not when it was Zava. And still you see he passed away young, bar minan, we should be zocher to live, arichut yamim v'shanim. Okay, let's continue. Tanat be'Eliyahu, we learned in the house of Eliyahu. So we just said this. We just saw this, by the way. How many times have you seen this? Tanat be'Eliyahu, kol shana halachot, b'chol yom shu ben olam haba, right? Kol shana halachot, b'dachlo, shu ben olam. Al tikra halachot, el halachot. Amar Rabbi Hanan, right? So we've said this 1,000,000 times. Just by the way, what does Tanat de be'Eliyahu mean? We learned debe
From the house of Eliyahu.
the house of Eliyahu. Where did we just have that word? We just said that a synagogue is called, turn back 2 pages, right? My Be Rabbanan. What is the house of the Rabbanan? Be is Beta, means the house of. So the house of a Torah scholar is the Be Midrash. So Tana de Be Eliyahu, the house of Eliyahu, the Be Midrash of Eliyahu, taught. Now, what does that mean? Machloket, either it means Eliyahu a Navi, or it means a Talmid Chacham whose name was Eliyahu. But either way, a person who learns halachot, he's guaranteed that he has olam haba. How much is halachot? Halachot means minimal, plural, 2. A person who learns 2 halachot every day, muftach lo, guaranteed, shul ben olam haba. Shneimar, as it says, halichot olam lo. The ways, halichot means the ways, the paths. Olam lo are to him. That's the literal interpretation. It means that God guides all the paths of this world, every path of every person. To him are all paths. Al tikre halichot el halachot. What does it mean when we say al tikre halichot el halachot? Every Sefer Torah, if you notice, it's not written with ta'amim. It's not written with nikudot. What does that allow you to do? That allows you to read a word that could be punctuated, could be written halichot, but you could also read it halachot if you changed it from a to a patach, to a kamas. So you'd be able to read it halachot as opposed to halichot. So if the Torah did it that way, that blank canvas is to allow for multiple readings within the confines of the Misorah, and you could learn multiple things from one word, read this way or read that way. Al tikre halichot, don't read it halichot, the ways of the world are his, rather halachot olam lo. A person who learns halachot olam lo, they become his world to come in Shamayim. So you have a portion in Gan Eden if you study 2 halachot every day. The Gemara continues. Okay? Tanu Rabbanan, we learned. Mevatlin Talmud, we're on Chavtet Amud Aleph. Mevatlin Talmud Torah, a person is able to stop studying Torah, lehotza'at hamet, to take out the dead. So in other words, let's say there's a funeral, and we need, for whatever reason, we need people that are studying Torah to attend the funeral or to be part of the burial party. You're allowed to close your Gemara to be mevatel Talmud Torah for it. Uleachnasat kala, and to bring a kala to her wedding. That could mean either to be able to raise the funds to be able to bring her to the wedding, or to be part of the procession of the wedding, to be able to make it into a joyous occasion, a wedding-like atmosphere. Amru alav Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, they said about this Rabbi Yehuda bar Ilai, he would stop learning in order to be able to do either of these two things. So you see the Torah places a tremendous dagesh and importance on these two mitzvot, hachnasat kala, marrying people off, and also halvayat hamet, to accompany hotzat hamet, to take out the dead. When do we say that this is the halacha that you're allowed to stop learning? B'she'en sham kol tzorko. Doesn't mean that every time there's a funeral, you close all the yeshivot, everyone should stop learning Torah. Everyone needs to go to every funeral. No. B'she'en sham kol tzorko. When there's not enough for the met. So in other words, let's say they need 2 people to dig, they only have 1. Let's say they need 5 people to carry it, they only have 3. So when there's a need for the funeral, for the burial, then you stop learning Torah in order to carry out the mitzvah. When there's already enough for the purpose of the funeral, then en vatlin, you do not stop Torah learning. Now, I just need to take a little bit of a pause for 1 second and drive something home. You see, most of us, we have this idea that we study Torah whenever we want to study Torah. We're going to, Rabbi, I'm great, I'm going to join a class. Now I'm going to join 2 classes a week. I'm going to try and learn here. I'm going to try and learn there. Understand that the Torah's version and understanding of what Torah looks like is exactly the opposite.
It's all day long.
You need to be learning Torah always. You're allowed to go make a living to support your family. You have to pray when you go pray. But we need to figure out what allows you to not be learning. Just let's for 1 second
Torah
grasp.
learning is the constant.
Let's grasp that we're having a conversation now. What allows me to not be learning?
That you're doing something.
Yeah, and not just anything. You're doing this mitzvah. You can't just randomly stop learning Torah. So what does that mean? You can't play basketball?
Yeah, I want to say that once you are learning, whether it's once a week or all the time, the only thing that would allow you to interrupt the learning is to go do these things.
So that's a good attempt.
I would hope.
It's a good attempt, but actually, it's really much more than that. What does the pasuk say? V'higita bo yomam v'layla, and you will study it day and night. Okay, some people say, yeah, some learning in the day and some learning in the night.
Rashi was a rhyme maker, Rambam was a doctor, Ramban was an astronomer, Abaye was a doctor. We have all these examples, all these big rabbanim who were working.
So we just said, so long as you're making parnasah for your family, you have to do another job for whatever reason, I'm allowed to walk away for that.
What happens in the space outside?
What happens in the space that's outside the work? Does it say that Rambam was a basketball player?
It's always on their lips. You said you can't walk 4 amot without tefillin or always learning.
I did not say that. I did not say that. That was an
really hit
extra
long
guy who went long life. Yeah? So that was like an extra. But that he didn't even walk 4 amot.
Well, the only way
So what does that mean? So you can't do anything ever?
No, it strengthens your learning.
So I just want to understand, imagine for a second that is where, I'm not saying we need to be there now. Imagine we started moving our life, our mind, our mindset to a place where it's okay for me to go play tennis or go play basketball. Okay, no problem. But what am I doing when I go play tennis? What am I doing?
You're freeing up your mind so that
I need this for my physical fitness. In order to do what?
focus.
You see, it's so interesting. You could flip your whole life on its head just by recognizing how the Torah wants you to see your life. So you want to take a night off and just go have a nice dinner with your friends? Great. What are you doing with your friends? I'm cultivating friends. The Mishnah says in Masechet Avot, Kinei lecha chaver, go acquire for yourself a friend. How do you acquire a friend? You spend time, you ask about their life, you love him, you give, you have great times together. But imagine if when you went out, you weren't thinking, you know what, I could really use a nice night just because I just want to enjoy myself. No, even relax. Why do I want to relax?
No,
It has to be for constructive purpose.
Exactly.
I was going with what you were saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You could turn your whole life into everything that you do is a constructive, beautiful, focused purpose.
That's
and,
what I like.
and it doesn't mean that you even lose spontaneity. Right? It means that anything that falls outside of that, hakol havel. Anything else is nothing. Anything that's in, and by the way, practically everything can be in.
And practically everything can be out.
What's the difference?
It's the mindset.
Mindset in, mindfulness on, in. Mindset off, mindfulness off, out. You're just wasting time. Okay? Wasting time is, Rav Noach Weinberg said it best. He said, people kill time, they're wasting time. He says, what is it to kill time, to waste time, to do nothing? He said, what is that? Some people call that vacation.
Throwing money out the window.
He used to call it suicide on the installment plan. Right, if you jumped off a building, what would you do? You'd be ending your life. You'd be taking off 5 years of your life. Don't we all waste 5 years of our life
Probably more.
with stupidity, wasting, whatever? He said, when you sit doing nothing, when you're wasting your time on something that's not important, that is committing suicide, but paying for it on the installment plan. I just thought that was one of the most insightful things I've ever heard anybody say. Wild. Okay, let's carry on.
So you're saying everything we do has to have a purpose,
Correct.
and that, I'm doing this for that. I'm doing this.
Yeah, you go out for a nice dinner with your wife. Think to yourself, I'm investing in my marriage. It's a beautiful thing.
Right.
It's beautiful. It just changes everything. I'm having this meal because it's healthy. What if it's not healthy? I'm having this meal because it tastes so delicious. I want to make a beautiful bracha. I want to treat myself. I want to enjoy. I want to be smiling. I want to be in a good state of mind. Having some nice food makes me so happy. And when I'm happy, I'm a nicer person. You see, some people just end before, they're so close. They're one step away. I want to have this because it makes me happy. Great, you're almost there. And then what? You're happy, and then what? I'm a better father if I'm happy. I'm nicer to be around. I do mitzvot if I'm happy. I'm a better husband.
It's like making everything lishma.
Lishma.
Everything.
Yes. Beautiful. But again, I just wanted to point this out, that we're like, you know what you're allowed to stop learning for? There's a funeral, but not just any funeral. A funeral where they really need you, right?
But if we have enough people,
They have enough
keep
people?
going.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, obviously, because why would you stop? Okay.
You see these big funerals in Israel with like a
Excellent. We're going to get there right now. Ask the Gemara. Ask the Gemara. V'kama kol tzorko. What does it mean that it has enough? Amar Rav Shmuel Ba'ini Mishmei de Rav. Rav Shmuel Ba'ini said in the name of Rav, Tresar alfe gavre. Veshita alfe shipure. 12,000 men and 16,000 people with shofars. What do we mean? What are we talking about here? What's the idea? Okay, so let's take a look. I just want to draw your attention, okay, to the differentiation between the men and the men with shofar. 6,000 men, 12,000 men, 6,000 men with shofarot. Why do you need 12,000 men and why do you need 6,000 shofarot? What are we talking about over here? We're talking about a tremendous Torah scholar. Yesterday, unfortunately, we lost one of the great tzaddikim of our generation. Rav Matisyahu Solomon was the mashgiach of Lakewood. He was the spiritual leader on a life lesson level of the biggest yeshiva in the world. Okay, he wrote books on Musar, tremendous Talmid Chacham, unbelievable tzaddik. And yesterday he passed away. There was yesterday at this funeral, I don't know how many people, maybe 100,000, maybe more, okay? That's what a funeral of a gadol is supposed to look like. I will never forget, as long as I live, the funerals that I've been to in Eretz Israel. I was at the funeral of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. Okay? There's no way to count the amount of people that are there. You know, I remember when they did the eulogies there. Every street corner, every porch, people are hanging off of the roofs of buildings. It was like the biggest event to ever happen in your life. You know, I remember also going to the funeral of Rabbi Yisrael Yaakov Fisher, also a tremendous dayan in Eretz Israel. You know, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that turn up to these funerals. I was not there for Cham Ovadiah's funeral. I wasn't in Israel, right? But that's what you're talking about. Hundreds of thousands of people. So the Gemara over here says, if there's only 17,000, shut your Gemara and go to the funeral. 12,000 men, 6,000 with shofar. Why you need a shofar? Because they used to blow shofar at these at funerals, and especially one of such a great import to the people. Okay, the Amrila, and some people say Tresa Alfi Gavri, 12,000 men, Uminayu Shita Alfi, and of the 12,000, 6,000 of them have shofars. So we just cut 6,000 from the total list that you need in order for it to say Kol Tzorko. Okay, Gemara continues. Ula Amar, what does it mean that you have enough? Kigon dechaitzi gavre me'abula ad sichra. If people are coming from the entrance to the city, packed all the way to the cemetery, right? That's enough. Rav Sheshet says, Kinetinata, kach netilata. Just like nitinata, when you gave the Torah at Har Sinai, that's how many were there. Kach netilata, so too when the Torah is taken away. Just like when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, how many men were there? 600,000. Kach netilata, so too netilata, when the Torah is taken away. When a Torah scholar, one of the giants of the generation, departs, it's like God took the Torah back from us. Kach netilata, goes away. So how many do you need? 600,000. What practically that means is that everybody has to shut the Gemara and go. Okay? Obviously, if there was a situation where you had that already, then we would be back to a yeshlo kol tzorko. There is enough. Okay? Hani mili, says the Gemara. Okay, so now that we just said that, Hani mili l'man dekari v'tani, for a person that knows all of Tanakh and all of Mishnah, aval l'man de matni, for someone that taught, that was not only a Torah scholar, a massive Torah scholar himself, but also taught everybody else, let le shi'ura. There is no limit, meaning no matter how many people are there, even if there's 600,000, it's not enough. One of the great teachers of Am Yisrael, it's limitless. Everyone needs to go. There's no excuse. Your Gemara closes. You stop learning Torah. You carry on. Let's continue. Tanya, the Braita says, look how HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves the Jewish people. Everywhere they went, the Shekhinah went with them into their exile. Galul Mitzrayim, they went down from Israel to Egypt. Shekhinah imahem, the Shekhinah was there. Shneimar, like it says, Haniglo nigleti el bet avicha bihiyotam Mitzrayim. The pasuk says, was I not there in your father's house when they went down to Egypt? Illustrating that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came down from Eretz Israel with Yaakov and his children to be with them in Egypt. Galul Bavel, they went from Israel to Bavel, to Babylon in the exile, the first exile, the destruction of the first temple. Shekhinah imahem, the Shekhinah was with them. Shneimar, lema'anchem shelachti bavela. For you, I've been banished Bavel. Also, the end of times when they are going to be redeemed, like it says, that God will return your captives at the end of time before the Mashiach. Bishav, the captives will be returned before the coming of Mashiach. Inshallah, that's referring to the ones in the lobby. We should be zochet to see them returning very, very quickly, and that should be followed immediately with the coming of the Mashiach. But you see that in the final redemption, before the coming of the Mashiach, it says, and God will return. So to speak, like, not God will get them, illustrating he's in Israel going out to get them, but rather God will return with them, because God exiles himself along with us in our exile. In fact, that's what we talked about this morning in the class, that God illustrates that when the Jewish people are suffering in Egypt, he appears to Moshe in a thorn bush to teach us that just like the Jewish people are suffering, my Shekhinah is also in pain, in a thorn bush, a place of pain. The Gemara says on that last piece of the Braita, Veheshiv, it doesn't say, and he will return them, Lo ne'emar ela v'shav, rather he will return himself with them. Shavi mahen miben hagaliot, with them as well. Es Gemara, beBavel hecha, another couple of minutes. Bavel Echa, where do we find in Bavel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was there? Amar Abaye says, Bebe Knishta de Hutzal, in the synagogue, in the Beit Knesset of Hutzal, one of the places in Bavel. Ube Knishta de Shaf V'yatib ben Arda, and in the Beit Knesset, the Shaf that was destroyed and rebuilt in Narda. In those two synagogues, in Bavel, Hashem Shekhinah can be found. Don't think that you find it in the synagogue of Hutzal and in the synagogue of Naharda that was destroyed and rebuilt. Not that he's in both. God is sometimes in one of them and sometimes in another. Fascinating.
He's everywhere.
Yes. Whenever we talk about God, God is everywhere. But when we talk about the Shekhinah, we're talking about the specific presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So God is Malech Ol Haaretz Kivudo. He's everywhere. But there's times when a person can feel the presence of God in a concentrated or in a resting place. Exactly. And the Gemara is telling us that he would almost alternate between these two Beit Knessets. All right? Fascinating.
So it's from this man's perspective if they feel that he's there or not.
Yes, but also that God is giving man that feeling in this place. Right. So when God, as an example, appears on this mountain, what does that mean? He's everywhere. The answer is yes, but the show of presence is being manifest on this mountain.
Why would it explain it like that at the risk of thinking that it's sort of, singular? Because if you say it like that, there could be the question of maybe Hashem's Shekhinah is it only in one place? So
it's a good question. We answered this question with regards to the synagogue, if you remember. We talked about how the fact that you can't end before two Pesukim, or you can't end with it when there's two Pesukim, or you can't start when there's two Pesukim. Why? Because the guy might, or the guy might, or the guy might. The Gemara says, but what about this case? The Gemara says, but if now that's different. When he leaves, so he's going to leave and make assumptions. But if he's here in the shul, if he's here present, then someone will explain it to him. This is not coming in a random, bit. This is in the Gemara. Anyone who's studying Gemara is a person who already has a background in understanding that God is everywhere. So the Gemara is not worried about doing that, which is very different than the time where the Gemara says that there are times when God specifically leaves a place for a person who, if they want to make a mistake, could make that mistake. I.e., in Bereshit, where he says, let us create man. Right. Yes, the Gemara, what do you mean, let us?
You say that?
Sounds like I had two gods. The Gemara says, he gave a place that if a person wants to be a heretic
you're out.
In the Torah, no problem, Fadal, you can do that. Okay. Let's finish this last piece. The Gemara says, on these two synagogues, Amar Abaye, Te'etili, let it come to me. In other words, I should get Sachar. D'chi marchikna parsa ailena umatzlita hatam. If I'm ever within one parsa, how much is one parsa? Parsa is a shiur of 4 mil. Okay, so it's quite far. If I'm in the perimeter of a parsa of either of these two synagogues, I don't pray locally. I walk all the way there in order to pray. So if I'm anywhere near Hutzal or the synagogue that was destroyed and rebuilt in Naharda, I go I go to pray there. The last bit that we're going to learn together is the Gemara is relating about that synagogue, about that place. Avua de Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, Levi. The father of Shmuel and Levi was sitting in that synagogue that we mentioned in Naharda. Atya Shechina, the Shechina came. I love that the Gemara is just like rolling this out. The two of them are sitting there, not the milkman came, and the Shechina came, okay? Atya Shechina, Sham'u kol rigsha. Suddenly they heard a sound, like a bustling sound. Kamu v'nafku. So they got up and they left. Once they saw that the Shekhinah was coming to the Beit Knesset, they understood this is above our pay grade to be here with the Shekhinah. So to show honor to the Shekhinah, they got up and they left. And we'll see in a minute what that means. One more story. Rav Sheshet was in that synagogue. At the Shekhinah came, velo nafak. He didn't go. Right? The angels of the Shekhinah that accompany God's presence started, miva'atu could mean kicking, miva'atu could also mean causing a great fear. Emotion. Right, so like causing him to fear, causing him distress, pressuring. Okay, trying to get him to leave. Amar lefanav, Rav Sheshet said in front of Hakadosh Baruch Hu, ignoring the angels. Ribono shel olam, Master of the world, aluv v'she'eno aluv, mi nidchem pnei mi. You have a person who is very very lucky, very fortunate, very praiseworthy. In other words, me, and. So the one who's not fortunate, me, and a fortunate one, i.e. the Malachei Asharet, who listens to who, right? Amalahu shavkuhu, leave him. 1 second, he just said, right? Aluv she'eno aluv mididchem nemi. If I'm unfortunate, if I'm the lower one, right? Who gets pushed off in front? The fortunate one or the unfortunate one? The fortunate one. So why is he not leaving? Why is he not leaving? Why, according to Rav Sheshet's own argument, why is he not going? Yeah?
He's not in a parsah.
Sorry? No, not why. He's already in the synagogue. So, this is a perfect example of when you see this idea that da'at Torah, hefech da'at ba'al habayit. That the way the Torah thinks is often not like the way we think. We think the guy who's fortunate is obviously better than the unfortunate guy. But in the eyes of the Torah, it's not like that. The fortunate person has to defer to the less fortunate. It's exactly the opposite. So Rav Sheshet is a person who was blind. Rav Sheshet is a person who had to toil in Torah. He's someone that suffered. These malachim, they're privileged. Who should have to leave? Who should listen to who?
So the angels have to listen.
They asked the angels. They had to leave. And no, not that they had to leave, but they had to leave him alone. And Hashem responds and says, Shavkuhu, let him stay. So let me ask you, why did Rav Sheshet refuse to leave? And the other two left. What's the reason?
I gave you
the hint.
We just told us that he was blind.
Oh, if you open up the Chumash, you'll see that when God appeared on Mount Sinai, it says that the people that were there,
they were blinded.
The elders looked,
they were blinded,
and they were punished for it. Because in looking, they were illustrating that this is something that I'm on the level to be able to see this.
That's why we cover our head during Kohanim, because the Shekhinah rests.
Exactly, and it's disrespectful to look at the Shekhinah, right? What's it called? So since that's the case, right? It says also that Moshe, when he saw that the Shekhinah was there, he moved away. And Hashem had to tell him, no, come. Okay? So when a person has the opportunity to see the Shekhinah, and they look, they get punished. So the first two people, Avuad, Shmuel, and Levi, they left. But Rav Sheshet was not worried. He can't see anyway. So Rav Sheshet says that Malachim are telling me to go. I'm an unfortunate guy. I'm sitting here. Do I have to listen to these angels? They should listen to me. They should not tell me to leave. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Rav Sheshet, you're right. And Rav Sheshet gets to perceive the Shekhinah, if not to look at it. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen. Amen.
Nice.
Guys, I'll see you later. Alamak.
Didn't you hear the commotion out there when we were